Hello, 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 and welcome to another reading stream. Today, we'll be continuing A Study in Scarlet, but not A Study in Scarlet in A Study in Scarlet. Instead, we're doing the second mystery, because we completed the first one last time. And why do I say that? Well, apparently it's labeled as Part 2, The Country of the Saints, and starts with a new Chapter 1. So, yeah, that's what we're going to be doing. So, just making sure I can be heard okay. Yep. Alrighty. Let's see. Now, I need to get my book. So, bear with me for a moment. That is the wrong set of buttons. Is my... Oh, wait, I'm on backgrounds. Okay. So, my thing wasn't syncing earlier. I mean, it still isn't, so can't do much with certain Steam things. I got really worried that I wouldn't be able to have my book. Alright. There we go. I have my book. My indistinct gray covered book. Got a notification. Hold on. Alright. Hi, Fleecy! Welcome to the stream. I'm glad you could make it. Also, to answer your question in the Discord, I have no idea. I even restarted my computer. That's usually what fixes it. I even logged out and logged back into Steam, and that didn't fix it either. Might need to restart a few times and hope for the best, but currently, for what I'm doing right now, this reading stream, it doesn't seem to be an issue. Yeah, super weird. Maybe Steam is coincidentally down. Yeah, because it wasn't just VTube Studios. I saw the symbol when I clicked on Monster Hunter Rise, so maybe it's just an issue with Steam as a whole right now. Because it did seem to be running pretty slow in general. But anyways, welcome. I'm glad you could attend. Oh, I gotta... Maybe, make myself a bit bigger. Do this. Brighten up my screen, maybe? I don't know. Happy Year? Aww. Put on the handsome smirk. Got mint tea, gonna be perfect. Alright. So, in case you didn't hear the little introduction bit, this is the second mystery in A Study in Scarlet, because it's split into two whole mysteries, including starting from a new chapter 1. Kinda new. So, this is called The Country of the Saints. Chapter 1. On the Alpine Plain. In the central portion of the great North American continent, there lies an arid and repulsive desert. which for many a long year served as a barrier against the advance of civilization. From the Sierra Nevada to Nebraska, and from the Yellowstone River in the north to the Colorado upon the south, is a region of desolation and silence. Nor is nature always in one unmoved throughout this grim district. It comprises snow-capped and lofty mountains, and dark and gloomy valleys. There are swift-flowing rivers, which dash through the jagged canyons. Why does canyon have a... Oh, it doesn't have a Y either. That's weird. And there are enormous plains, which in winter are white with snow, in summer are gray with sullen and alkali dust. They all preserve, however, the common characteristic of barrenness, inhospitality, and misery. There are no inhabitants of this land of despair. A band of Paunis or Blackfeet may occasionally traverse it in order to reach other hunting grounds. But the hardiness of the braves are glad to lose sight of those awesome plains, and find themselves once more upon their prairies. The coyote skulks among the scrubs. The buzzard flaps heavily through the air, and the clumsy grizzly bear lumbers through the dark ravine, and pick up such sustenance as it can amongst the rocks. These are the sole dwellers in the wilderness. In the whole world, there can be no more dreary view than that from the northern slopes of Sierra Blanco, as far as the eye can each, as far the eye can reach, stretches the great flat plainlands, all dusted over with patches of alkali, eh, and inserted by clumps of the dwarfish carp or cap carparol bushes. On the extreme verge of the horizon lies a long chain of mountain peaks, with their rugged summits flecked with snow. In the great stretch of the country there is no sign of life, nor of anything appertaining to life. There is no bird in the steel blue heaven, no movement upon the dull gray earth. Above all, that is absolute silence. Or above all, there is absolute silence. Listen as one may, there is no shadow of a sound in all the mighty wilderness, nothing but silence, complete and heart subduing silence. Man, if this guy goes any more on about how empty this place is, I'm gonna start wondering about him here. Look how much empty you can fit into this place, slaps car. He's into empty rooms. It has been said that there is nothing appertaining to life upon the broad plain. That is hardly true. Looking down from Fierro Blanco, one sees a pathway traced out across the desert, which winds away and is lost in the extreme distance. It is rutted with wheels and trodden down by the feet of many adventurers. Here and there are scattered white objects, which glisten in the sun, stand out against the dull deposits of alkali. Approach and examine. They are bones, some large and coarse, others smaller and more delicate. The former have belonged to an oxen, the latter to men. For 1,500 miles one may trace the ghastly cavern route by these scattered remains of those who have fallen by the wayside. Looking down on this very scene, there stood upon the 4th of May, 1847, a solitary traveler. His appearance was such that he might have been of the very genius or demon of the region. An observer would have found it difficult to say whether he was near to 40 or to 60. His face was lean and haggard, and the brown parchment-like skin was drawn tightly over the projecting bones. His long brown hair and beard were all flecked and dashed with white. His eyes were sunken in his head and burned with an unnatural luster. while the hand which grasped his rifle was hardly more fleshy than that of a skeleton. As he stood, he leaned upon his weapon for support, and yet his tall figure and massive framework of his bones suggested a very wiry and vigorous constitution. His gaunt face, however, and his clothes, which hung so baggedly over his shriveled limbs, proclaimed what it was that gave him that or senile and decrepit, senile and decrepit appearance, or decrepit. That's the word. The man was dying from hunger and from thirst. Water time. Right on cue. Yep. He had toiled painfully down the ravine and on to this little elevation, in the vain hope of seeing some sign of water. Now the great salt plain stretched before his eyes, and a distant belt of savage mountains, without a sign anywhere of plant or tree, which might indicate the presence of moisture. In all that broad landscape there was no gleam of hope. North and east and west he looked with wild, questioning eyes, and he realized that his wanderings had come to an end, and that there, on that barren crag, he was about to die. Why not here, as well as in a feathered bed 20 years hence? He muttered as he seated himself in the shelter of a boulder. Before sitting down, he had deposited upon the ground his useless rifle, and also a large bundle tied up in a gray shawl, which he had carried slung over his right shoulder. It appeared to be somewhat too heavy for his strength, for in lowering it, it came down on the ground with some little violence. Instantly there broke from the gray parcel a little moaning cry, and from it protruded a small, scared face, with very light brown eyes and two speckled, dimpled fists. "You hurt me," said a childish voice reproachfully. Have I, have I though? The man answered penitently. I didn't go for to, I didn't go for to do it. As he spoke, he unwrapped the gray shawl and extracted a pretty little girl about 5 years of age, whose dainty shoes and small pink frock with its little linen apron all bespoke a mother's care. The child was pale and wan, but her healthy arms and legs showed she had suffered less than her companion. How is it now? He answered anxiously, for she was still rubbing the towsy gold curls which covered the back of her head. Kiss it and make it well, she said, with perfect gravity, showing the injured part up to him. That's what Mother used to do. Where's Mother? Mother's gone. I guess you'll see her before long. Gone, said the girl. Funny, she didn't say goodbye. She most always did if she was just going over to Auntie's for tea. Now she's been away 3 days. Say, it's awfully dry, ain't it? Ain't there no water nor nothing to eat? I have a vibe this is not a Sherlock Holmes story. Just a vibe. This is very, very different. My favorite, existentialism and death. I mean, I guess this was the first Sherlock Holmes book, so if this second one isn't another Sherlock Holmes story, makes sense he didn't know the character would be that popular. No, there is nothing, dearie. You'll just need to be patient a while, and then you'll be all right. Put your head up again like that, and you'll feel a bullier. It ain't easy to talk with your lips, it's like leather, but I guess I'd best let you know how the cards lie. What's that you've got? Pretty things, fine things, cried the little girl enthusiastically, holding up two glittering fragments of Mecca. When we goes back home, I'll give them to Brother Bob. You'll see prettier things in them soon, said the man confidently. You just wait a bit. I'm going to tell you, though. You remember when we left the river? Oh, yes. Well, we'd reckon we'd strike a river soon, you see. But there was something wrong. Compass or map or something. It didn't turn up. Water ran out. Just expecting a little drop for the likes of you and you couldn't wash yourself, interrupted his companion gravely, staring at his grimy visage. No, nor drink, and Mr. Brenner, or Mr. Bender, he was the first to go, then Indian Pete, then Mrs. McGregor, then Johnny Holmes, and then dearie, your mother. Then mother's a deader too, cried the girl, dropping her face in a pinafore and sobbing bitterly. Yes, that's all we'd except you and me. Then I thought there was some chance of water in this direction, so I heaved you over my shoulder, and we tramped it together. It don't seem as though we've improved matters. There's an almighty chance, hence for us now. Do you mean that we're going to die too? Asked the child, checking her sobs and raising her tear-stained face. I guess that's about the size of it. Why didn't you say so before? She said, and laughing gleefully. You gave me such a fright. Why, of course, now as long as we die, we'll be with mother again. Yes, you will, dearie. And you too. I'll tell her how awfully good you've been. I bet she meets us at the doors of heaven with a big pitcher of water, a lot of buckwheat cakes, hot and toasted on both sides, like Bob and me were fond of. How long will it be first? I don't know. Not very long. The man's eyes were fixed upon the northern horizon. In the blue vault of the heavens that had appeared, three little specks was increasing in size every moment. So rapidly did they approach, they speedily resolved themselves into three large brown birds, which circled over the heads of the two wanderers, and settled upon some rocks which overlooked them. They were buzzards, the vultures of the west, whose coming is the forerunner of death. Cocks and hens, cried the girl gleefully, pointing at their ill-omened forms, and clapping her hands to make them rise. Say, did God make this country? In course he did, said her companion, rather startled by this unexpected question. He made the country down in Illinois, and he made the Missouri, the little girl continued. I guess somebody else made the country in these parts. It's not nearly so well done. They forgot the water and the trees. What would you think of offering up a prayer? The man asked diffidently. It ain't night yet, she answered. It doesn't matter. It ain't quite regular, but he won't mind that, you bet. You say over them ones that you used to say every night in the wagon when we was on the plains. Why don't you say some yourself? The child asked with wandering eyes. I disremembered them, he answered. I hain't said none since I was about half the height of that gun. I guess it's never too late. You say them out, and I'll stand by and come in on the course. Then you need to kneel down. Then you'll need to kneel down, and me too, she said, laying the shawl out for their purpose. You got to put your hand up like this. Makes you feel kind of good. It was a strange sight, had there been nothing but the buzzards to see it. Side by side on the narrow shawl kilts of the two wanderers, the little prattling child, the reckless-hearted adventurer, her chubby face and his haggard, angular visage, were both turned up to the cloudless heavens, the heart-beat entry to that dread. It being with whom they were face to face. All the two voices, the one thin and clear, the other deep and harsh, united in the entry for mercy and forgiveness. The prayer finished. They resumed their seat in the shadow of the boulder until the child fell asleep, nestled upon the broad vest of her protector. He watched over her slumber for some time, but nature proved to be too strong for him. For 3 days and 3 nights he had allowed himself neither rest nor repose. Slowly the eyelids dropped over the tired eyes, head sank lower and lower upon the breast, until the man's grizzled beard was mixed with the golden tresses of his companion. Both slept the same deep and dreamless slumber. Had the wanderer remained awake for another half hour, a strange sight would have met his eyes. Far from the extreme verge of the alkaline plains there rose up a little spray of dust, very slight at first, hardly to be distinguished from the mist of the distance, but gradually growing higher and broader till it formed a solid, well-defined cloud. This cloud continued to increase in size till it became evident that it could only be raised by a great multitude of moving creatures. In more fertile spots the observer would have come to the conclusion that one of those great herds of bison which graze upon the prairie lands was approaching him. This was obviously impossible in these arid wilds, as the whirl of dust drew closer to the solitary bluff upon which the two castaways were reposing. The canvas-covered tilts of the wagons, and the figures of the armed horsemen beginning to show up through the haze. The apparition revealed itself as being a great cavern upon its journey for the west. But what a cavern! Or caravan, that's the word. When the head of it had reached the base of the mountain, the rear was not yet visible on the horizon. Right across the enormous plain stretched the array. Wagons and carts, men on horseback, men on foot, innumerable women who staggered along under burdens, and children who toddled behind the wagons, or peeped out from behind the white covering. This is evidently no ordinary party of immigrants, but rather some nomad people who had been compelled from stress of circumstances to seek themselves a new country. There rose through the clear air a confused clattering and rumbling from this great mass of humanity, the creaking of wheels and neighing of horses. Loud as it was not sufficient to rouse the two tired wayfarers above them. As the head of the column there rose a score or more of grave, iron-faced men, clad in sombre homespun garments and armed with rifles. All reaching the base of the bluff they halted, and held a short council amongst themselves. "The whales are to the right, my brothers," said one, hard-lipped, clean-shaven man with grizzly hair. "To the right of the San Blanco, so they reach east the Rio Grande," said another. "Fear not for water," cried a third. "He who could withdraw it for the rocks will not now abandon his own chosen people." "Amen, amen," responded the whole party. They were about to resume their journey when one of the youngest and keenest eyed uttered an exclamation and pointed up at the rugged crag above them. From its summit there fluttered a little wisp of pink, showing up hard and bright against the gray rocks above. At the sight there was a general reining up of horses and unslinging of guns, whilst fresh horsemen came galloping up to reinforce the vanguard. The words "Redskins" was on every lip. There can't be any number of Injuns here," said the elderly man who appeared to be in command. "We have passed the Pawnis, and there are no other tribes until we cross the great mountains." "Shall I go forth and see, Brother Staggerson?" "Oh, oh, well, ain't that something?" I guess we do have a little bit of crossover. And I, cried a dozen voices. "Leave your horses below, and we will await you here," the elder answered. In the moment the young fellows had dismounted, fastened their horses, and were ascending the precipitous slope which led up to the object which had had excited their curiosity. They advanced rapidly and noiselessly, with the confidence and dexterity of practiced scouts. The watchers from the plains below could see them flirt from rock to rock until figures stood out against the skyline. The young man who had first given the alarm was leading them. Suddenly his followers saw him throw up his hands as though overcome with astonishment, and on joining him, they affected the same way by the sight which met their eyes. On the plateau which crowned the barren hill stood a single giant boulder. Against the boulder there lay a tall man, long beard, hard in features, but of excessive thinness. His placid face and regular breathing showed he was fast asleep. Beside him lay a little child, their round white arms encircling his brown spiny neck, her golden haired head resting upon the breast of his villetin and tunic. Her rosy lips were parted, showing the regular line of snow-white teeth within, and a playful smile played over her infantile features. Her plump little white legs, terminating in white socks and neat shoes with shining buckles, offered a strange contrast to the long, shriveled members of his companion. On the ledge of the rock above the strange couple there stood three solemn buzzards, who at the sight of the newcomers uttered raucous screams of disappointment and flapped sullenly away. The cries of the foul birds awoke the two sleepers, who stared about them in bewilderment. The man staggered to his feet and looked down upon the plains which had been so desolate when sleep had overtaken, and which was now traversed by this enormous body of men and of beasts. His face assumed an expression of incredulity. Let's look that word up. The state of being unwilling or unable to believe something. Incredulity? It's what we do here. As he gazed and he passed his bony hand over his eyes. "This is what you call delirium, I guess," he muttered. The child stood beside him, holding on to the skirt of his coat, and said nothing but looked all around with the wondering, questioning gaze of childhood. The rescuing party were speedily able to convince the two castaways that their appearance was no delusion. One of them seized the little girl and hoisted her upon his shoulder, while the two others supported her gaunt companion and assisted him towards the wagons. "My name is John Ferrer," the wanderer explained. "Me and that little un are all that's left of 21 people. The rest is all dead of thirst and hunger away down in the south." "Is she your child?" asked someone. "I guess she is now." "Oh, I guess she is now," the other cried defiantly. "She's mine 'cause I saved her. No man will take her from me. She's Lucy Ferrer from this day on. Who are you? Who are you, though?" he continued. Wait, what? Oh, okay, that was supposed to be him. That was very confusing. Just said the other. Let's try that again. "I guess she is now," the other cried defiantly. "She's mine 'cause I saved her. No man will take her from me. She's Lucy Ferrer from this day on. Who are you, though?" he continued, glaring with curiosity at his stalwart, sunburned rescuers. There seems to be a powerful lot of you." "9 upon 10,000, then," said one of the young men. "We're persecuted children of God, and the chosen of Angel Maradona." "I've never heard tell of him," said the wanderer. "He appears to have chosen a fair crowd of ye." "Do not jest of which is sacred," said the other sternly. "We are those who believe in this sacred writing, drawn in Egyptian letters on plates of beaten gold, which were handed unto the holy Joseph Smith at Padre Maloney. We come from Doppel, in the state of Illinois, where we have founded our temple. We have come to seek refuge from the violent man and from the godless, and even though it be the heart of the desert. The name of Navajo evidently recall the name of Navajo evidently recall a recollection of John Ferrer. I see, he said. You are the Mormons. We are Mormons, answered his companions with one voice. And where are you going? We do not know. The hand of God is leading us on under the person of one prophet. We must come before him. He shall say what it is to be done with you. They had reached the base of the hill by this time, and were surrounded by the crowd of the pilgrims, pale-faced, meek-looking women, strong, laughing children, and anxious, earnest-eyed men. Many were cries of astonishment and commiseration, which arose from them when they perceived the youth of one of the strangers, and the desolation of the other. Their escort did not halt, however, but pushed on, followed by a great crowd of Mormons until they reached a wagon which was conspicuous for its great size, and for the gaudiness and smartness of its appearance. 6 horses were yoked to it, whereas the others were furnished with 2 or at most 4 apiece. Beside the driver there sat a man who could not have been more than 30 years of age, but whose massive head and resolute expression marked him as leader. He was reading a brown-backed volume, but as the crowd approached, he laid it aside and listened intently to an account of the episode. Then he turned to the 2 castaways. What voice to give this guy? Take a swing of water and consider. Hillbilly? I don't know why Hillbilly was auto-modded. That was weird. Let's see. If we take... no. If we take you with... No. Try and do like a high-pitched hillbilly, but it keeps forming something else. Now there, I reckon. I think that might work. If we take you with us, he said in solemn words, it can only be as believers in our creed. We shall have no wolves in our field. Better far that your bones should bleach in this wilderness, than you should prove to be that little speck of decay which in time and corrupts the whole fruit. Will you come with us on these terms? That works perfect. Awesome. Well, I guess I'll come with you on any terms, said Fenrir with such emphasis that the grave elders could not restrain a smile. The leader alone retained his stern, impressive expression. Take him, brother Strangerson, he said. Give him food and drink, and the child likewise. Let it be your task also to be teach. That is sounding more like a southern pastor. Though that might actually fit, considering they're Mormons. I'll need to practice hillbilly a bit more. Anyways, give them food and drink, and the child likewise. Let it be your task also to teach him our holy creed. We have delayed long enough. Forward! On to Zion! On to Zion, said the crowd of Mormons, and the word rippled down the long caravan, passing from mouth to mouth until they died away in the dull mutter in the far distance. With a cracking of whips and a creaking of wheels, the great wagons got into motion, and soon the whole caravan was winding along once more, the elder to whose care the two weft had been committed, led them to his wagon, where a meal was already awaiting. You shall remain here. Are the elders the elder the one they were just talking to? No, it was not. You shall remain here, he said. In a few days you will have recovered from your fatigue. In the meantime, remember that now and forever you are our religion. Brigham Young has said it. He has spoken with the voice of Joseph Smith, which is the voice of God. Do we want to continue this or actually switch to an actual Sherlock Holmes book? Because we're on chapter 2 now. I know I set up a particular expectation for this. Alright. So, this isn't a complete bust, though. Oh, this could be for something else. But let's actually set up the expectation next time for whatever the hell this is. Existentialism and dread. That means I need to look up what Sherlock Holmes story comes next. Sherlock Holmes reading order. The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes should be next. Should? I mean, I know it's more, they're more open-ended with the exception of, the last clue, which is like the middle. And then, after that, so anyways, just making sure, yeah, his last bow, that's the middle. Well, I say middle, but it's like whenever he supposedly was going to die and then it got retconned. You know, that whole deal. Let's, so the Adventures of Sherlock Holmes should be our next one. Zoom in, zoom in, okay. Sherlock. Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. And just to be sure, dates of Holmes books. Oh, this might be a bit wonky. So, release-wise, The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes was released 2 years after The Sign of Four. So let's check to make sure. Yeah, 1890, and then Adventures came in 1892. So let's do A Sign of Four. I think. Gotta make sure this is actually what we're looking for. We don't want to end up with whatever the hell we were just on. Da 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 da. Sign of Four, Conan Doyle's book. Science and Deductions, case statement. Does it recap the science of a deduction every time? Okay. So yeah, these are Sherlock Holmes mysteries this time. They actually are this time. So let's change so it's called, is it A Sign of Four or The Sign of Four? The Sign of Four. Gonna do a quick tweet on that. Hold on. Making some stuff. Seconds. Alright, by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. I think everything else here checks out. Yeah, I had all the tags set up as Sherlock Holmes, Mystery Detective. Man, that'd be awkward if none of those things were happening in the second story of the first Sherlock Holmes book. Funny that. Funny that. My favorite, existentialism. And forced conversion. It wasn't a bad story, but not what I was looking for off-brand Sherlock. It was by the same author. It was in the same goddamn book. It was literally just the second half of the fucking book. But it wasn't what we were here for. We were here for Sherlock Holmes. And there was no Sherlock Holmes. Making sure I have everything looking right. The Sign of Four spin-off episode. It had like one name in addition. It had the same Stranger Sun person. Conan was truly ahead of his time. You see, this is what happened to the guy before he came to London and got his fucking ass murdered. This was him before, and this is an encounter he had with someone. He's still not the main character, so you know, sucks to be him. No, the main character, this guy, is connected by like one background character. Pre-sequel. Prequels. Anyways, let's actually start the Sherlock Holmes story then. And it shares a title with, or the chapter title with a chapter title in the first book. But you know what? There's no law against that. Also, what am I looking at? Oh, that's still the Adventures of Sherlock Holmes tab. Okay. Chapter 1. The Science of Deduction. Sherlock Holmes took his bottle from the corner of the mantelpiece, and his hypodermic syringe from his neat morocco case. With his long, white, nervous fingers, he adjusted the delicate needle. And okay, I guess we're starting off with heroin, or opium. I knew he had a drug problem, but man, that's an opening. and rolled back his left shirt cuff. I really don't like reading this. I don't like needles. For some little time, his eyes rested thoroughly upon the swannery form, and wrist all dotted and scarred with impenetrable puncture marks. Finally, he thrust the sharp point home and pressed down the tiny piston and sank back into the velvet-lined chair with a long sigh of satisfaction. Could you not, Holmes? Could you do that off-screen? Please and thank you. Ugh. 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 I don't like needles. I can read it for you if you need. I'm past that paragraph. See if we can get through this opening. Man, what an opening. It's like, I hope you enjoyed existentialism. Now, time for drug abuse. This is a disaster. You got Holmes, but now he's a drug addict. I won, but at what cost? Three times a day, for many months, I had witnessed this performance, but custom had not reconciled my mind to it. We have Sherlock Holmes, but at what cost? Yeah, you're telling me. On the contrary, from day to day, I had become more irritable at the sight. My conscience swelled nightly within me at the thought that I lacked the courage to protest. Again and again I had registered a vow that I should deliver my soul upon the subject. But there was that in the cool nonchalant air of my companion which made him the last man with whom would care to take anything approaching to a liberty. His great power, his masterful manner, and his great experience, which I had had of his many extraordinary qualities, all made him different and backwards in crossing me. Or defendant? That is not how you spell defendant, because that's with an I. Defendant. That's so weird. I'm looking that word up. Defendant. Modest or shy because of a lack of self-confidence. Yet upon that afternoon, whether it was the bouen in which I had taken in with my lunch, or the additional exasperation produced by the extreme deliberation of his manner, I suddenly felt that I could hold out no longer. Which is it today? I asked. Morphine or cocaine? He raised his eyes languidly from the old black-letter volume which he had opened. It is cocaine, he said. A 7% solution. Would you care to try it? No, indeed, I answered brusquely. My constitution has not yet gotten over the Afghan campaign yet. I cannot afford to throw any extra strain upon it. He smiled at my vehemence. Perhaps you are right, Watson, he said. I suppose it is that its influence is physically a bad one. I find, however, so transcendently stimulating and clearing to the mind that its secondary action is a matter of a small moment. But consider, I said earnestly, count the cost. Your brain may, as you say, be roused and excited, but it is a pathological and morbid process, which involves increased tissue change, and may at last leave a permanent weakness. You know, too, what a black reaction comes upon you. Surely the game is hardly worth the candle. Why should you, for a mere passing pleasure, risk the loss of those great powers with which you have been endowed? Remember that I speak not only as one's comrade to another, but as a medical man, and to one for whose constitution he is to some extent answerable. He seemed not offended. On the contrary, he put his fingertips together and leaned his eyebrows on the arm of his chair. like one who had relish for conversation. My mind, he said, rebels at stagnation. Give my problems, give me work, give me the most obscure cryptogram and the most intricate analysis, and I am in my proper atmosphere. I have dispensed them with artificial stimulation. I can dispense them with artificial stimulations, but I abhor the dull routine of existence. I crave for mental. Something smells smoky. Maybe someone's burning something. Oh wait, it's probably something smoky, and it's just wafting in here. Blech. I crave for mental acceleration, and that is why I have chosen my own particular profession, or rather created it, for I am the only one in the world. The unofficial detective, I said, raising my eyebrow. Reassuring? Yeah. I mean, it's that or burnt popcorn. Or it's the smell of the heater next to me. I'll go ahead and turn it off for now. Oh yeah, it's not as foul as smoking. So yeah, I think it was the heater. Anyways, the unofficial detective, I said, raising my eyebrows. The only unofficial consulting detective. He answered, I'm the last and highest court of appeal and deduction. When Gregson and Lestrade, or Alclany, Jones, are out in their depths, which, by the way, is their normal state, the matter is laid before me. I examine the data as an expert and pronounce a specialist's opinion. I claim no credit in such cases. My name figures in no newspapers. The work itself, the pleasures of finding a field for my particular powers, is my highest reward. But you have yourself had some experience of my methods of work in the Jefferson Hopes case. And now the back of my legs are instantly cold. Fuck. Yes, indeed, I said cordially. I was never so struck by anything in my life. I even embodied it in a small brochure, which the somewhat fantastic title of A Study in Scarlet. I also put a very weird existential story in the second half of it, just to fill it out for the publisher. What the hell are you talking about, Watson? He shook his head sadly. I glanced over it. He said, honestly, I cannot congratulate you upon it. Deduction is, or ought to be, an exact science, and should be treated in the same cold and unemotional manner. You have attempted to tinge it with a romanticism, which produces much the same effect as if you worked a love story, or an afflement of the fifth proportion of the Iliad, or Echelin. But the romance was there, I remonstrate. I remonstrated? What? What does that word mean? Past tense. Make forcefully reproachable protest. All right. I could not tamper them with the facts. Some facts should be suppressed, or at least, in a just sense of proportion, should be observed in treating them. The only point in the case which is worth mentioning was the curious analytical reasoning from effects to cause by which I succeeded in unraveling it. I don't know how, but I've made Sherlock Holmes sound somewhat Spanish. I was annoyed at the criticisms of my work, which had been lore. What, my lore or his lore? His lore is very, very distinct. His lore. I'm pretty sure he's a Brit through and through. New lore. He's Spanish. He's a Spaniard now. Deal with it. Well, it's not even Latino. It'd be an actual Spaniard, considering the continent they're on. Like someone from Spain. It's like, yeah, remember that's a country. Don't worry, most Americans forget about it. Just like Spanish isn't a country. Spain is, though. God, people are stupid sometimes. Anyway, I'm not American, I'm European. Then you probably have a better grasp on its existence than most people here. I'll tell you that. Not necessarily that you think about it, but that it exists. I don't know where in Europe you live, so I can't say for sure your relative feelings on this on the matter, but I shall leave it there. Well, I'll leave anything like that without prying too much. Where was I? Here. I was annoyed at his criticisms of my work, which had been specifically designed to please him. I confess, too, that I was irritated by the egotism, which seemed to demand that every line of my pamphlet should be devoted to his own special doings. More than once during the years I had lived with him. Years? Damn, man. This is the second Sherlock Holmes story. It's been years since the first case? What the hell? In Baker Street, I have observed that a small vicinity underlay my companion's quiet and detective manner. I made no remark, however, but sat nursing my wounded leg. I had a Jizzle bullet through it some time before, and though it did not prevent me from walking, it ached wearily at every change of the weather. He's been between jobs. That's kind of a thing with Watson though. Oh, he isn't able to work anymore. At least not in their current society in the way he had. He's a trained doctor, but due to war injuries, PTSD, he's not able to work. He gets paid by the government so much every day, and that's why he had originally been a bit frivolous with his money, and now he met. I'm recapping the start of the study of Scarlet, but he was seeking a roommate because he knew he couldn't keep up that lifestyle. Just like, man, I really need to figure out my finances and shit. He met up with a friend who introduced him to Holmes, who was looking for someone to go half and half in this place they're living. That's the explanation for Watson's whole thing. I know you didn't ask for that, but uh, that's how the A Study in Scarlet starts. Watch BBC Sherlock. Yeah, yeah, he was an army doctor before this, though. My practice has extended recently into the continent, said Holmes after a while, filling up his old briar root pipe. I was consulted last week about Francis Levander, who, as you probably know, has come rather to the front lately in the French detective service. He has all the Celtic power of a quick intuition, but he is deficient in the wide range of exact knowledge, which is essential to the higher developments of his art. The cane the case was concerned with the will and possessed some features of interest. I was able to refer him to two parallel cases, the one in Riga in 1857, the other at St. Louis in 1871, which have suggested to him that the true solution. Here is the letter which I had this morning. Acknowledge my assistance. He tossed over as he spoke a crumpled sheet of foreign note paper. I glanced at my eyes down on it, catching a profusion of notes of aberration with stray magnificence and Cote de Maltres and Tours de Force, all testifying to the adherent admiration of the Frenchman. He speaks as a pupil to his master, said I. Oh, he rates my assistance too highly, said Sherlock Holmes lightly. He has considerable gifts himself. He possesses two out of the three qualities necessary for the ideal detective. He has the power of observation and that of deduction. He is only wanting in knowledge, and that may come in time. He is now translating my small works into French. Your works? Oh, did you know? Oh, didn't you know? He cried, laughing. Yes, I am guilty of several monograms. They are all upon technical subjects. Here, for example, is upon the distinction between the ashes of various tobaccos. In it, I enumerated 140 forms of cigarette, and pipe tobacco, which colored palettes illustrated the difference in ash. It is a point which is continuously turning up in criminal trials, which is sometimes of supreme importance as a clue. If you can say definitely, for example, that some murder has been done by a man who is smoking Indiana Luncheon, it is obvious narrows your field of search. The trained eye, there is as much difference between the black ash of Turgaski and the white fluff of a bird's eye as those is between a cabbage and a potato. Referencing the first story again, because that was one of the clues they had. You have an extraordinary genius for a minute, I remarked. I appreciate their importance. You use a monograph upon the tracing of footsteps, which some remarks upon the use of plaster of Paris as a preserver of impressions. Here, too, is a curious little work upon the influence of a thread upon the form of the group. With leather type, it's the hand of salters and sailors, crook and cutters, composers and weavers, diamond polishers. That is a matter of great practical interest to the scientific detective, especially in the case of unclaimed bodies or in the discovery of the identical of criminals. But I rarely deal with my hobbies. I'm almost making him sound like Dracula. God damn it. This voice was supposed to be unique. Son of a bitch. Not at all, I answered earnestly. It is of the greatest interest to me, especially since I have had the opportunity of observing your practical application of it. But you spoke just now of observation and deduction. Surely the one of some extent implies to the other. Why, hardly, he answered, leaning back, ah, he answered, leaning back luxuriously in the armchair and sending up thick blue wreaths from his pipe. For example, observation shows me that you have been to Wigmore or Street Post Office this morning, but deduction let me know that there you dispatched a telegram. Right, I said. Right on both points, but I confess that I don't see how you arrived at it. It was a sudden impulse upon my part, and I have mentioned it to no one. It is simplicity itself, he remarked, chuckling at my surprise. so absurdly simple that an explanation is superfluous, and yet it may serve to define the limits of observation and of deduction. Observations tells me that you have little reddish mold adhering to your instep, just the opposite of Wing Street. It offers those they have taken up on the pavement and thrown up some earth which lies in a way that is difficult to avoid in treading in it treading in it in entering. What the fuck? No. No to that grammar. This is getting added to the collection. Not for being ridiculous in composition, but being fucking grammatically horrid. Do 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 do. The collection of what? It was mold. The earth is of this particular reddish tint, which is found, as far as I know, nowhere else in the neighborhood. So much is observation, the rest is deduction. How, then, did you deduce the telegram? Why, of course, I knew that you had not written a letter, since I sat opposite to you all morning. I see also in your open desk that you have a sheet of stamps and a thick bundle of postcards. What could you go into the post office for, then, but to send a wire? Eliminate all other factors, and the one which remains must be the truth. In this case, it is certainly so, I reply, after a little thought. The thing, however, is, as you say, of the simplest. Would you think me impertinent if I were to put your theories to a more severe test? On the contrary, he answered. You would prevent me from taking a second dose of cocaine. Please, Watson, stop him. I don't want to read another needle line. Please. Distract this man. I should be delighted to look into any problems which you might submit to me. I have heard you say that it is difficult for a man to have any object in daily use without leaving the impression of his individuality upon it in such a way that its trained observer might read it. Now I have here a watch which has recently come into my possession. Would you have the kindness to let me have an opinion upon the character or habits of the late owner? I handed him the watch with some slight feeling of amusement in my heart, for the test was, as I thought, an impossible one. I intended it as a lesson against the somewhat dogmatic tone which he occasionally assumed. He balanced the watch in his hand, gazed hard at the dial, and opened the back and examined the works, first with his naked eye, and then with a powerful convex lens. I could hardly keep from smiling at his chest-fallen face when he finally snapped the case and handed it back. There are hardly any data, he remarked. The watch has been recently cleaned, which robs me of the most suggestible facts. You are right, I answered. It was cleaned before being sent to me. In my heart I accused my companion of putting forward a most lame and impotent excuse to cover his failure. What data could he expect from an uncleaned watch? Though one is satisfactory, my research has not been entirely barren, he observed, standing up in the ceiling with a dreamy, lackluster eye. Subject to your correction, I should judge that this watch belonged to your elder brother, who inherited it from your father. That you gather, no doubt, from the HW upon the back. Quite so. The W suggests your own name. The date on the watch is nearly 50 years back. The initials are as old as the watch. So it was made for the last generation. Julie usually descends to the eldest son, and he is the most likely to have the same name as the father. Your father has, if I remember right, been dead many years, and therefore been in the hands of your eldest brother. Right so far, said I. Anything else? He's a man of untidy habits, very untidy and careless. He was left with good prospects, but he threw away his chances, lived for some time in poverty, before occasional short intervals of prosperity, and finally taking to drink, he died. That is all I can gather. I sprang from my chair and limped impatiently about the room in considerable bitterness in my heart. This is unworthy of you, Holmes, I said. I could not have believed that you would have descended to this. You have made inquiries into the history of my unhappy brother. You now pretend to deduce this knowledge in some fanciful way. You cannot expect me to believe that you read all this from his old watch. It is unkind, and to speak plainly, has touched charlatanism in it. My dear doctor, he said kindly, pray accept my apologies. Viewing the matter as an abstract problem, I have forgotten how personal and painful a thing it might be to you. I assure you, however, I have never even known that you had a brother until you handed me this watch. Then how, in the name of all that is wonderful, did you get these facts? They are absolutely correct in every particular. Ah, that is good luck. Could only say, what was the balance of probability? I did not at all expect it to be so accurate. But it was no mere guesswork! No, no, I never guess. It is a shocking habit, deductive, destructive to the logical faculty. What seems strange to you is only so because you do not follow my train of thought, or observe the small facts on which laws and inference may depend. For example, I begin by stating that your brother was careless. When you observe the lower part of that watch case, you notice that it is not only dented in two places, but is cut and marked all over from the habits of keeping in other hard objects, such as coins or keys, in the same pocket. Surely there is no great feat to assure that a man who treats 50 guineas as watch so cavalierously must be a careless man. Neither it is as far-fetched inference that a man who inherits one article of such value is pretty well provided for in other respects. I nodded to show I followed his reasoning. It's very customary for pawnbrokers in England, when they take a watch, to scratch the number of the trinket with a pinpoint upon the inside of the case. It is more handy than illegal, as there is no risk of the number being lost or transposed. There is no less than 4 such numbers visible to my lens on the inside of the case. Inference that your brother was often at low water. Secondary inference that he occasionally burst to prosperity, or could not have redeemed the pledge. Finally, I ask you to look at the inner plate, which contains the keyhole. Look at the thousands of scratches all around the hole, marked where the key is slipped. Whatsoever man's key would have scored those grooves, but they will never see a drunkard watch without them. He winds it at night and leaves those traces at his unsteady hand. Where the mystery is all this? It's clear as daylight, I answered. I regret the injustice which I did you. I should have had more faith in your marvelous faculty. May I ask whether you have any professional inquiry on foot at present? None. Hence the cocaine. I cannot live without brain work. What else is there to live for? Stand at the window here, whatever, for such a dreary, dismal, unprofitable world. See how the yellow fog swirls down the street and drifts across the dun-colored houses. What could be hopelessly prospect and material? What is the use of having powers and doctor when one has no field upon which to exert them? Crime is commonplace. Existence is commonplace, and no quality saves those which are commonplace have any function upon the earth. I had opened my mouth to reply to the tirade, when, with a crisp knock, our landlady entered, bearing a card upon the brass salver. What? Is that a type of plate? Yes, it is a type of tray. A tray, typically one made of silver, used for formal circumstances. I figured that's what it was, due to context, because I've seen those in movies and whatnot. A young lady for you, sir, she said, addressing my companion. Miss Morton, he said. I have no recollection of the name. Ask the young lady to step up, Mrs. Hudson. Don't go, Doctor. I should prefer that you remain. How we doing, Fleecy? We falling asleep? Oh, it's good that you're falling asleep. You said it was a bedtime story. Come on. I ain't scolding you. I'm just wondering if I'm doing my job right. Chapter 2. The Statement of the Case. Miss Morrison entered the room with a firm step and outward composure. Yeah, it's almost 2 a.m. here. You are. Yay! Sherlock Bakugo. Hi, Cat. I'm glad Cat missed the second story we had started. That was a weird one. So basically, the first book of Sherlock Holmes is called A Study in Scarlet, but it's separated into two separate books. The second story didn't have anything to do with Sherlock Holmes, and it was really sad. Needless to say, after chapter 1, we switched to the next Sherlock Holmes installment. Yeah, so be glad you missed that. That was weird. Mrs. Morrison entered the room with a firm step and an outward composure of manner. She was a blonde. She was a blonde young lady, small, dainty, well gloved, and dressed in the most perfect taste. There was, however, a plainness and simplicity about her costume, which bore with it a suggestion of limited means. The dress was a sombre grey binge, untrimmed and unbraided. She wore a small turban, and of the small dull hue, relieved only by a suspicion of white feather there in the side. Her face had neither regularity of feature nor beauty of complexion, but her expression was sweet and amiable, and her large blue eyes were singularly spiritual and sympathetic. In an experience of women whose extends over many nations and 3 separate continents, I have never looked upon a face which had a clearer promise of refined and sensitive nature. I could not but observe that she took the seat which Holmes had placed for her. Her lips trembled, her hands quivered, and showed every sign of intense inward agitation. Ah, yeah, that always sucks. Hate it when OBS doesn't want to cooperate. I was having an issue with Steam earlier trying to get it to sync up. Never did get that sorted, but at least I am here. I can be seen, and I have my book. I have come to you, Mr. Holmes, she said, because you once enabled my employer, Mrs. Cecile Foster, to unravel a little domestic complication. She is much impressed by your kindness and skill. Mrs. Cecile Foster, he repeated thoughtfully. I believe that I was of some slight service to her. The case, however, as I remember it, was a very simple one. Making food now and listening? All right. She did not think so, but at least you cannot say the same of mine. I hardly imagine something more strange, more utterly inexplicable than the situation in which I find myself. Holmes rubbed his hands and his eyes glistened. He leaned forward in his chair with an expression of extraordinary concentration upon his clear-cut, hawk-like features. "State your case," said he in brisk business tones. I felt that my position was an embarrassing one. "You will see, I am sure. Excuse me." "You will, I am sure. Excuse me," I said, rising from my chair. Me telling the parents. To my surprise, the young lady held up her gloved hand to detain me. "If your friend," she said, "would be good enough to stop, he might be of inestimable service to me." I relapsed to my chair. "Briefly," she continued, "the facts are these. My father was an officer in the Indian regiment who sent me home when I was quite a child. My mother was dead, and I have no relatives in England. I was placed, however, in a very comfortable boarding establishment in Edinburgh, and there I remained until I was 17 years of age. In the year 1878, my father was a senior captain of his regiment, obtained 12 months' leave, and came home. He telegraphed to me from London that he arrived all safe, and directed me to come down at once, given the Longman Hotel as his address. His message, I remember, was full of kindness and love. On reaching London, I drove to London and informed the Captain Morstan, who was staying here, but that he had gone out for the night before and not yet returned. I waited all day without news of him. That night, on the advice of the manager of a hotel, I communicated with the police, and the next morning we advertised in all papers. Our inquiries led to no result, and from that day to this, no word is ever heard of my unfortunate father. He came home with his heart full of hope, to find some peace and some comfort instead." She put her hand to her throat. A choking sob cut short the sentence. "The date," said Holmes, opening his notebook. "He disappeared upon the 3rd of December, 1878, nearly 10 years ago." 10 years ago, and you're just now talking to Holmes. Jesus Christ. Does no one in here know anything about urgency? Good luck telling her parents then. Mom's dead, dad's missing. I am a ghost. His luggage remained at the hotel. There was nothing in it to suggest a clue. Some clothes, some books, and a considerable number of curiosities from Andaman and islands. He had been one of the officers in charge of the convict guard there. Had he a friend in town? Only one that we know, Major Sholto, of his own regiment. Worth it when truck cut is around. The 34th Bombery Infantry. The major has retired some little time before, and lived at Upper Northwood. We communicated with him, of course, and we did not even know that his brother officer was in England. A singular case, remarked Holmes. I have not yet described to you the most singular part. About 6 years ago, to be exact, about the 4th of May, 1882, an advertisement appeared in the Times asking for the address of Miss Mary Morstan, and stating that it would be to her advantage to come forward. There was no name or address appended. I had at that time just entered the family of Mrs. Isil Foster in the capacity of governess. By her advice, I published my address in the advertisement column. The same day there arrived through post a small cardboard box addressed to me, when I found it contained a large and lustrous pearl. No word of writing was enclosed. Since then, every year, upon the same date, there has always appeared a similar box, containing a small pearl, without any clue to the sender. They have been pronounced by an expert to be of rare variety and of considerable value. You see, for me, they are very handsome. She opened a flat box as she spoke, and showed me 6 of the finest pearls I had ever seen. Your statement is most interesting, said Sherlock Holmes. Has anything else occurred to you? Yes, and no later than today. That's why I've come to you. This morning I received this letter, which you will perhaps read for yourself. Thank you, said Sherlock Holmes. The envelope too, please. Postmarked London, and SW date July 7th. Man thumb mark on the corner. Probably postman. Best quality paper. Envelopes at 6 pence a packet. Particular man in the stationery. No address. Be at the third pillar there from the left outside the locker room theatre. Tonight at 7 o'clock. If you are distrustful, bring 2 friends. You are a wronged woman, and shall have justice. Do not bring police. If you do, all will be in vain. Your unknown friend. Well, really, this is a pretty little mystery. What do you intend to do, Miss Mawson? This is exactly what I want to ask you. Then we shall most certainly go. You and I, yes. Why, Watson is the very man. Your correspondent says 2 friends. He and I worked together before. But would he come? She asked with something appealing in her voice and expression. I shall be proud and happy, I said fervently, if I can be of any service. You are both very kind, she answered. I have led a retired life. I have no friends with whom I can appeal. If I am here at 6, will do, I suppose. You must not be later, said Holmes. There is one other point, however. Is his handwriting the same that upon the pearl box addresses? I have them here, she answered, producing half a dozen pieces of paper. You are certainly a mild client. You have the correct intuition. Let us see now. He spread out the papers upon the table, gave a little darting glance from one to the other. They are disguised hands, except the letter, he said presently. But there is no other question as to the authorship. See how the impression in Greek E will break out, and see the twirl of the final S. They are undoubtedly by the same person. I should not like to suggest false hope, Miss Morton, but there is a resemblance between this hand and that of your father. Is there a resemblance between this hand and that of your father? Nothing could be more unlike. Nothing could be more unlike. Okay, so not the same. I expect to hear you say so. We shall look out for you. Then at 6, pray allow me to keep the papers. I may look into the matter before then. It is only 3:30. Au revoir, then. Au revoir, said our visitor, and with a bright, kindly glance from one to the other, she replaced her pearl box in her bosom and hurried away. Standing at the window, I watched her walking briskly down the street until the gray turban and white feather there were a speck of the sombre crowd. Words. What a very attractive woman, I explained, turning to my companion. He had lit his pipe again and was leaning back into drooping eyelids. Is she? He said languidly. I do not observe. You really are an automation, or an automatron. A calculating machine, I cried. There is something positively inhuman in you at times. He smiled gently. It is of the first importance, he said, not to allow your judgment to be based by personal qualities. A client to me, a mere unit, a factor in the problem. The emotional qualities are antagonistic to clear reasoning. I assure you that the most winning woman I ever knew was hanged for poisoning 3 little children for their insurance money. The most repellent man of my acquaintance is a philanthropist who spent nearly $250,000 upon the London poor. In this case, however, I never make exceptions. An exception disproves the rule. Have you ever had occasions to study characters and handwriting? What do you make of the fellow's scribbles? It is legible and regular, I answered. A man of business habits and some force of character. Holmes shook his head. Look at his long letters, he said. They hardly rise above the common hand. The D might be an A, and that L and E. Men of character always differentiate their long letters, however illegibly they may write. There is a vacillation in his case, and so esteem in his capitals. I am going out now. I have some few references to make. Let me recommend this book, one of the most remarkable ever penned. It is Winwood Reade's Martyrdom of Man. I shall be back in an hour. I sat in the window with a volume in my hand, but any thoughts were, for from the daring speculation of the writer, my mind ran upon some late visitor, her smiles and deep rich tones of her voice, the strange mystery which overhung her life. If she were 17, and at the time of her father's disappearance, she must be 27 now, a sweet age when youth has lost its self-conscious and become a little sober by experience. So I sat and mused until such dangerous thoughts came into my head that I hurried away to my desk and plunged frantically into the latest treatise upon pathology or paleology. It's not paleontology because that's too short a word. Pathology? What was I, an army surgeon with a weak leg and weaker banking account, that I could dare to think of such a thing? She was a unit, a factor, nothing more. My future were black. It would better surely to face it like a man than attempt to brighten it by a mere will-o-wisps of the imagination. Ah, my neck. Take a swing of water. Chapter 3. The Quest of a Solution. It was 5:30 when Holmes returned. He was bright and eager, and in excellent spirits, a mood which in his case alternated with fits of blackest depression. "There is no great mystery in this matter," he said, taking the cup of tea which I had poured him. "The facts appear to admit of only one explanation." "What, you have solved it already?" "Well, it would be too much to say. I've discovered a suggestive fact, that is all. It is, however, very suggestive. The details are still to be added. I have just found, on consulting the back files of the Times, that the Major Salanto of Utter Norwood, late of 34 Banbury in February, died upon 28th of April, 1882. I may be very obtuse, Holmes, but I fail to see what this suggests." "No, you surprise me. Look at it this way. Captain Morrison disappeared. The only person in London who could have visited him is Major Salanto. Major Salanto denies having heard that he was in London. 4 years later, Salanto dies. Within a week of his death, Captain Morrison's daughter receives a valuable present, which is repeated from year to year, and now culminates in a letter which describes her as a wronged woman. What wrong can refer to except this deprivation of her father? Why should the presence begin immediately after Salanto's death, unless that Salanto's heir knows something of the mystery, and desires to make in compensation? Have you any alternative theory which will meet the facts?" "But what a strange compensation, and how strangely made! Why, too, should he bring a letter now rather than 6 years ago? Again, the letters speak of giving her justice. What justice can she have? If it is too much to suppose that her father is still alive, then there is no other injustice in her case that you know of." "There are difficulties. There are certainly difficulties," said Sherlock Holmes pensively, "but other expeditions of tonight will solve them. Ah, use the four-wheeler, and Mrs. Morton inside. Are you all ready? Then we had better go down, for it is a little past the hour." I picked up my hat and my heaviest stick, but I observed that Holmes took his revolver from his drawer and slipped it into his pocket. It was clear that he thought tonight's work might be a serious one. Mrs. Morris was muffled in a dark cloak, and her sensitive face was composed but pale. She must have been more than woman if she did not feel some uneasiness of the strange enterprise on which she was embarking. Yet her self-control was perfect, and she readily answered the few additional questions of which Sherlock Holmes put to her. "Major Salanto was a very particular friend of Papa's," she said. "His letters were full of owlish, allusions to the Major. He and Papa were in command of the troops at Adraman Island, so they might throw a great deal together. They were thrown a great deal together. By the way, a curious paper was found in Papa's desk, which no one could understand. I don't suppose it is of the slightest importance, but I thought you might care to see it, so I brought it with me. It is here. Holmes unfolded the paper carefully, smoothed it out on his knee. He then very methodically examined it all over his double lens. It is the paper of an American manufacturer, he remarked. It has at some time been pinned to a board. The diagram upon it appears to be a plan and a part of a large building with numerous halls, corridors, and passages. At one point is a small cross dome in red ink. Upon it, a 3.37 and from left, in faded pencil writing. In the left-hand corner is a curious hieroglyphic, like 4 crosses in a line with their arms touching. Beside it is written a very rough and coarse character, the sign of 4, Jonathan in small, Mohammed signal, Abdullah Khan, Dos Akbar. No, I confess that I do not see how this bears upon the matter. Yet evidently a document of importance has been kept carefully in a pocketbook, for this one is clean on the other side. It was in his pocketbook when we found it. Pervasively, preserve it carefully then, Mrs. Morrison, for it may prove to be of use to us. I begin to suspect that this matter may turn out to be much deeper and more subtle than I had first supposed. I must reconsider my ideas. He leaned back in the cab, and I could see by his drawn brow and his vacant eye that he was thinking intently. Miss Morse and I chatted in an undertone about the present expedition and its possible outcome, but our companion maintained his impenetrable resolve until the end of the journey. It was a September evening, and not yet 7 o'clock, but the day had been a dreary one, and a dense drizzly fog lay low upon the great city. Mud-colored clouds drooped sadly over the muddy streets. Down the Strand the lamps were but misty splotches of diffused light, which threw a few feeble circular glimmers upon the slimy pavement. The yellow glare from the window-keepers streamed out and into the streamy, vaporous air, and threw a murky, shifting radiance across the crowded thoroughfare. There was, to my mind, something eerie and ghost-like in the endless processions of faces which flitted across those narrow bars of light, sad faces and glad, haggard and merry, like all humankind. They flitted from the gloom into the light, and so back into the gloom once more. I am not subject to impressions, but the dull, heavy evening, with the strange business upon which we were engaged, combined to make me nervous and depressed. I could see from Mrs. Morrison's manner that she was suffering from the same feeling. Holmes alone could rise superior to petty influences. He held his own notebook upon his knee, and from time to time jotted down figures and memoranda in the light of his pocket lantern. At the Lycurian Theatre, the crowds were already thick at the side entrances. In front, a continuous stream of hansoms and four-wheelers were rattling up, discharging their cargo of shirt-fronted men and bediamonded women. We had hardly reached the third pillar. All right, have a great day, Kathy. Thanks for stopping by. We had hardly reached the third pillar, which was our rendezvous, before a small, dark, brisk man in the dress of a coachman accosted us. Aw, head pets. Are you the party I used to come with Miss Morton? He asked. I am Miss Morton, and these 2 gentlemen are my friends, said she. He bent a pair of wonderfully penetrating and questioning eyes upon us. You'll excuse me, miss, he said, with certain dogged manner, but I must ask you to give me your word that neither of these companions is a police officer. I give you my word on that, she answered. He gave a shrill whistle, in which a street Arab led across a four-wheeler and opened the door. The man who addressed us mounted to the box while we took our places inside. We had hardly done so before the driver whipped up his horse and plunged away at a furious pace through the foggy streets. The situation was a curious one. We were driving to an unknown place, on an unknown errand, yet our invitation was either a complex hoax, which is an inconceivable hypothesis, or we had good reason to think that the important issue might hang upon on our journey. Mrs. Morrison's demeanor was resolute, or Mrs. Morrison's demeanor was resolute and collected as ever. I endeavored to cheer and amuse her by reminiscing of my adventures in Afghanistan, but to tell the truth, I was myself so excited at our situation, so curious as to our destination, that my stories were slightly involved. To this day she declares that I told her one moving anecdote as to how a musket looked into my tent at the dead of night, how I fired a double-barreled tiger cub at it. At first I had some idea of the direction in which we were driving, but soon, what with our pace, the fog, my own limited knowledge of London, I lost my bearings and knew nothing, save that we seemed to be going at a very long way. Sherlock Holmes was never at fault, however, and muttered the names as the cabs rattled across the squares and out by tortured by-streets. "Rochester Row," said he. "Now Village Square. Now we come out at Bridge Hall. We are making for Serenity Side. Apparently, yes, I thought so. Now we are on the bridge. We can catch glimpses of the river." We did intend to get a fleeting view of a stretch of the Thames, with a lamp shining upon the broad, silent water, but our cab dashed on, and was soon involved in a labyrinth of streets upon the other side. "Wordsworth Road," said my companion, "Reverie Road, Lockhall Lane, Stockwell Place, Robert Street, Cold Harbour Lane. Our quest does not appear to take us to very fashionable regions." We had indeed reached a questionable and forbidding neighborhood. Long lines of dull brick houses were only relieved by the coarse glare and twinkling brilliance of public houses at the corner. Then came rows of two-storied villas, each with a fronted miniature garden, and then again interminable lines of near-staring brick buildings, the monster tentacles which the giant city was throwing out into the country. At last the cab drew up at the third house on a new terrace. None of the other houses were inhabited, and at which we stopped was as dark as its neighbors, save for a single glimmer in the kitchen window. On our knocking, however, the door was instantly thrown open by a Hindu, servant clad in a yellow turban, white loose-fitting clothes, and a yellow sash. There was something strangely incongruous in this oriental figure, framed in the commonplace doorway of a third-rate suburban dwelling. "The shop awaits you. The shop awaits you," said he. Even as he spoke, there was a high, piping voice from the inner room. "Show them in, show them in, Conqueror," it said. "Show them straight to me." That's probably not a good voice for it. That's more, sailor. Chapter 4. Should I continue? Don't know if I should continue. The time, my runtime. My runtime, I can go longer. Chapter 4. The story of the bald-headed man. We followed the Indian down a sordid and common passage, ill-lit and worse furnishing, until we came to a door upon the right, which he threw open. A blaze of yellow light streamed out upon us. In the center of the glare there stood a small man, with a very high head, and a bristle red hair all around the fringe of it. A bald, shining scalp was shot out from among all the mountain peaks from fir trees. He writhed his hands as he stood, and his features were in a perpetual jerk, now smiling, now scowling, but never for an instant in repose. Nature had given him a pendulous lip and a too visible line of yellow and irregular teeth, which he strove feebly to conceal by consistently passing his hand over the lower part of his face. In spite of his obtrusive baldness, he gave the impression of youth. In point of fact, he had turned his 13th year. Yosef! I need a good name, or a good voice for this. Um, hmm. Let's see. Supposed to think they're doing like an Indonesian guy. But I don't want to just do the stereotypical Indian voice. That'd be lame. I don't really vibe with that. Give him a solid voice. Not British though. Well, actually, he could have a British accent if he had still lived here. Um, hmm. Let me see. Your servant, Mr. Morrison. No, no. What about Vegeta? Your servant, Miss Morton. He kept repeating in a thin, high voice. Oh, high voice? Oh dear. Do I give him the Krillin voice? Did say he's rather short and bald. Alright, Krillin voice it is. Sorry, dude. Your servant, Mrs. Morton. Or Miss Morton. He kept repeating in a high voice. Your servant, gentlemen. Pray step into my little sanctum. A small place, miss, but furnished to my own liking. An oasis of the heart in a howling desert of self-loathing. We were all astonished by the appearance of the apartment into which he invited us. In that story house it looked as out of place as a diamond in the finest waters, in a setting of brass. The richest and glossiest of curtains and tapestries draped the walls, looped back here and there to expose some richly mounted painting or oriental vase. The carpet was of amber and black, so soft and so thick that the foot sank pleasantly into it, into a bed of moss. Too great a tiger skin throws Ashwit it increased. Thrown a wasp it increased the suggestion of Eastern luxury, as did a large hookah which stood upon on a mat in the corner. A lamp in the fashion of a silver dove was hung from an almost invisible golden wire in the center of the room. As it burned, it filled the air with a subtle and aromatic odor. Mr. Thaddeus Salto, said the little man, still jerking and smiling. That is my name. You're Miss Morton, of course. And these gentlemen. This is Mr. Sherlock Holmes, and this is Dr. Watson. Doctor, huh? Cried he, much excited. Have, have you your stethoscope? Have you your stethoscope? Might I ask you, would you have the kindness? I have grave doubts as to my mortal value. If you would be so very good, the Ortic I may rely upon, but I suppose value your opinion upon the material. I don't know what any of that means. Does he think he's unhealthy? I don't know. Hold on. I listened to his heart as requested, but was unable to find anything amiss, save indeed that he was in ecstasy of fear, for he shivered from head to foot. It appears to be normal, I said. You have no cause for uneasiness. You'll have to excuse my anxiety, Miss Morton, he remarked airily. I am a great sufferer, and have long had suspicions as to that value. I'm delighted to hear they are unwarranted. Had your father, Miss Morton, refrained from throwing a strain upon his heart, he might have been alive now. I could have struck the man across the face. So hot was I at this callous and offhanded reference to so delicate a matter. Miss Morrison sat down, and her face grew white to the lip. I knew in my heart that he was dead, said she. I can give you every information, said he. And what is more, I can do you justice, and I will too. Whatever brother or Bartholomew may say, I am so glad you have your friends here, not only as an escort to you, but also as witness to what I am about to do and say. 3 of us can show a bold front to Brother Bartholomew, but let us have no outsiders, no police or officials. We can settle everything satisfactorily among ourselves, without any interference. Nothing would annoy Brother Bartholomew more than any publicity. He sat down upon a low seat and blinked at us inquiringly with his weak, watery blue eyes. For my part, said Holmes, whatever you may choose to say will go no further. I nodded to show my agreement. That is well, he said. May I offer you a glass of Chattanooga, Miss Morrison, or of Taki? I keep no other wines. Shall I open a flask? No. Well, then I trust you'll have no objection to tobacco smoke. The mild balsamic odor of the Eastern tobacco. I am a little nervous. I find my hookah an invaluable sedative. He applied a tapper to the great bowl. The smoke bubbled merrily through the rose water. He said we all three sat in a semicircle, with our heads advanced, our chins upon our hands, and with the strange, jerky little fellow with his high, shining head puffed uneasily in the center. When I first determined to make this communication to you, said he, I might have given you my address, but I fear that you might disregard my request, and being unpleasant people with you, I took the liberty, therefore, of making an appointment in such a way that my man, Williams, might be able to see you first. I have complete confidence in his discretion, and he had orders, if he was dissatisfied, to proceed no further in the matter. You'll excuse these precautions, but I am a man of somewhat retiring, I might even say refined taste, and there is nothing more unaesthetic than a policeman. I have natural shrinking from all forms of rough materialism. I seldom come in contact with a rough crowd. I live, as you see, with little atmosphere of elegance around me. I may call myself a patron of the arts. It is my weakness. A landscape is a genuine court, and some connoisseurs might perhaps throw a doubt upon that Sabato Rosé. There cannot be the least question about the what is that word? Borgurano. I am partial to the modern French school. You will excuse me, Mr. Shalato, or Shalto, said Mrs. Moore. I keep saying Mrs. It just says Miss. But I am here at your request to learn something which you desire to tell me. It is very late. I should desire the interview to be as short as possible. At the best, it might take some time, he answered. For we shall certainly have to go to Norwood and see Brother Bartholomew. He shall all go and try if we can get the better of Brother Bartholomew. He is very angry with me for taking this course which he has seemed right to me. I had quite high words with him last night. You cannot imagine what a terrible fellow he is when he's angry. If we are to go to Norwood, would it perhaps be as well to start at once? I ventured to remark. He laughed until his eyes were quite red. That would hardly do, he cried. I do not know what he would say if I brought you in that sudden way. No, I must prepare you by showing you how we all stand to each other. In first place, I must tell you that there are very several points in this story which I myself am arrogant. I can only lay the facts before you as far as I know them myself. Okay. My father was, as you may have guessed, Major John Shillotto, one of the Indian Army. He retired some 11 years ago and came to live at Punaguri Lodge in Upper Norwood. He had prospered in India and brought back with him a considerable sum of money, a large collection of valuable curiosities, and a staff of native servants. With these advantages, he bought himself a house and lived a great luxury. My twin brother Bartholomew and I were the only children. I very well remember the sensation which was caused by the disappearance of Captain Morstan. We read the details in the paper, and knowing that we had been a friend of our father's, we discussed the case freely in his presence. He used to join our speculation to what could have happened. Never for an instant did we suggest he had the whole secret hidden in his own breast, that of all men he knew, or that of all men he alone knew the fate of Arthur Morstan. We did know, however, that some mystery, some positive danger overhung our father. He was very fearful of going out alone, and always employed two prize fighters to act as porters at Pondicherry Lodge. I need water. The Krillin voice is rough. I mean, it's not even a perfect Krillin voice right now because I'm trying to do different inflictions. Where was I? There it is. Williams, who drove you tonight, was one of them. He was once lightweight champion of England. Our father would never tell us what it was he feared, but he had the most marked aversion to men with wooden legs. On one occasion, he actually fired his revolver at a wooden-legged man who proved to be a harmless tradesman in caravassing for orders. He had to pay a large sum to hush the matter up. My brother and I used to think this was a mere whim of my father, but events since have led me to change my opinion. Early in 1882, my father received a letter from India, which was a great shock to him. He nearly fainted at the breakfast table when he opened it, and from that day he is stricken to death. Or he's sickened to his death. What was in the letter we could never discover, but I could see he held it, that it was short and written in a scrawling hand. He had suffered for years from an enlarged spleen, but now he had become rapidly worse, and towards the end of April we were informed that he was beyond all hope, and he wished to make a last communication to us. When we entered his room, he propped up with the pillows and breathing heavily. He besought us to lock the door, or come upon either side of the bed. Then, grasping our hands, he made a remarkable statement to us, in a voice which was broken by emotion, as much by emotion as by pain. I shall try and give it to you in his own very words. I have only one thing, he said, which weighs upon my mind at this supreme moment. It is my treatment of poor Morrison's orphan, the cursed greed which has been besetting sins through life which has withheld from her treasures half at least of which should have been hers, and yet I have made no use of it myself. So blind and foolish a thing is avarice. The mere feeling of possession has been so dear to me that I could not bear to share it with another. See that chaplet dripping with pearls. Hey, that's perfectly fine. You didn't have to. I appreciate the thought, though. I'm sure it's nothing personal. Hold on, shoulder. Foshy. Me she'll curse them. Aw, you don't need to do that. I'm sure it's fine. I'm sure they're fine. You'll be okay. That sounds like a trailing off statement. Oh, goodness. You goober. The mere feeling of possession has been so dear to me that I could not bear to share it with another. See that chaplet dipped with pearls behind the quinton bottle? Even that I could not bear to part with, although I had, had got it out with the design of sending it to her. You, my sons, will give her a fair share of Argan's treasure, but send her nothing, not even the chaplet, until I'm gone. After all, men have been bad at this and have recovered. I will tell you how Morstan died, he continued. He had suffered for years from a weak heart, and had concealed it from everyone. I alone knew. When in India, he and I, through a remarkable chain of circumstances, came into possession of a considerable treasure. I brought it over to England, and on the night of Morrison's arrival, he came straight over to claim his share. He walked over from the station, was admitted by his faithful Alal al-Shawdar, who is now dead. Morrison and I had a difference of opinion as to the division of the treasure. We came to heated words. Morrison had sprung out of his chair in a paroxysm of anger, when he suddenly passed his hand to his side. His face turned a dusky hue, and he smelled backwards, cutting his head upon the corner of the treasure chest, which I stooped over him. I found to my horror he was dead. For a long time I had sat half distanced, wondering what I should do. My first impulse was, of course, to call for assistance. I could not but recognize that there was a very chance I could have accused of his murder. His death at the moment of quarrel, and the gash in his head, would be black against me. Again, an official inquiry could not be made without bringing out some facts about the treasure, which I particularly anxious to keep secret. He had told me that no soul upon the earth knew where he had gone. There seemed to be no necessity why any soul ever should know. I was still pondering over the matter when, looking up, I saw my servant Lachowder in the door. He stole in, bolted the door behind him. "Do not fear, Shabad," he said. "No need to know that you have killed him. Let us hide him away, and who is the wiser?" "I did not kill him," I said. Said I. Lachowder shook his head and smiled. "I heard it all, Shabab," he said. "I heard you quarrel, and I heard the blow. But my lips are sealed. All are asleep in the house. Let us put him away together. That was enough to decide me. If my own servant could not believe my innocence, how could I hope to make it good before 12 foolish tradesmen in a jury box? Chowder and I disposed of the body, and that night, within a few days, the London papers were full of mysterious disappearances of Captain Mortison. You'll see from what I say that I can hardly be blamed in this matter. My fault lies in the fact he has concealed not only the body, but also the treasure. Oh my God, this is a flashback of a flashback of a flashback. God damn it! But also the treasure that I have clung to Morrison's share as well as to my own. I wish you, therefore, to make restitution upon. Put your ears down to my mouth. The treasure is hidden in. At an instant, a horrible change came over his expression. His eyes stared wildly. His jaw dropped, and yelled in a voice which I could not forget, "Keep him out! For Christ's sake, keep him out!" We both stared around the window. No, behind us, which his gaze was fixed, a face was looking in at us from the darkness. You could see the widening of the nose was pressed against the glass. It was a bearded, hairy face, with wild, cruel eyes, an expression of concentrated malevolence. My brother and I rushed to the window, but the man was gone. When we returned to my father, his head had dropped, and his pulse had ceased to beat. When we reached the garden that night, I found no signs of the intruder, save that just under the window, a small... Slaps the old man. His mysteries are solved. Now McDonald's. Like, well, that's enough of that. No, wait, we still don't know where it all is. Oh, well, McDonald's. McDonald's isn't invented for a few hundred more years. McDonald's. Take 50 chicken nuggies. Nice. Good choice. Good choice. Soda. Honey mustard. I'm not a sauce person. I eat my chicken nuggies straight up. No time for sauce. We searched the garden that night, but found no sign of the intruder, save just under the window a single footmark was visible in the flower bed. Nah. Home takes sauce so we can put it in a homemade cheeseburger. Yeah, if I do end up getting sauces, I just pawn them off on someone else. Be like, hey, you want some sauce, whatever the fuck you're doing? Same with like, we would do the same growing up with like ketchup packets and shit. But for that one trace, we might have thought that our imaginations had conjured up that wild, fierce face. We soon, however, had another and more striking proof that there were secret agencies at work all around us. The window of my father's room was found open in the morning. His cupboard and boxes had been rifled, and upon his chest was affixed a torn piece of paper with the words "Assigned to the floor" scrawled across it. Title drop. Throws a bat at the old man. Is he dead yet? Yeah, the old man's dead. He's been dead for some 6 years now. This is a flashback tale. Or flashback part. Yeah, no McDonald's. No, wait, we still have to solve the mystery. Yeah, here's the mystery. Why the hell aren't we at McDonald's yet? What the phrase meant, or who our secret visitor may have been, we never knew. Want to find the old man, take him while he's still alive in the flashback now McDonald's. As far as we can judge, none of my father's property was actually stolen, though everything had been turned out. My brother and I naturally associated the particular event with a fear which haunted my father during his life. It is still a complete mystery to us. The little man stopped to relight his hookah and puffed thoughtfully for a few moments. We had all sat, absorbed, listening to its extraordinary narrative. At the short account of his father's death, Miss Morrison had turned deathly white. For a moment, I feared that she was about to faint. She rallied, however, on drinking a glass of water, and I quietly poured out for her from a Vienton Craffritz from the side table. Sherlock Holmes leaned back in his chair with an abstrakt expression, lips drawn and low over his glittering eyes. As I glanced at him, I could not think how on that very day he had complained bitterly of the commonplaces of life. Here was that the problem which would tax his sagacity, his sagacity to his utmost. Mr. Thaddeus Eschalot looked from one to the other, and the other of us with an obvious pride at the effect which his story had produced. They continued between the puffs of his overgrown pipe. Need more water. Krillin voice exhausting. My brother and I, said he, or said he, were, as you may imagine, much excited as to the treasure which my father had spoken of. For weeks and for months we dug and delved in every part of the garden without discovering its whereabouts. It was maddening to think that the hiding place was his very lips at the moment that he died. We could judge the splendor of the missing riches by the chaplet he had taken out. Over the over this chaplet my brother Bartholomew and I had some little discussion. The pearls were evidently of great value. He averse to part with them, and for between friends and my brothers was himself a little inclined to my father's fault. He thought, too, that if we parted with the chaplet, it might give rise to gossip, and finally bringing us into trouble. It was all that I could do to persuade him to let me find out Mrs. Morrison's address, and send her a detached pearls at fixed intervals, so at least she might not never feel destitute. It was a kindly thought, said our companion earnestly. It was extremely good of you. The man waved his hand and deprecatingly. We were your trustees, he said. That was the view in which I took of it, though Brother Bartholomew could not altogether see it in that light. We had plenty of money ourselves. I desired no more. Besides, it could have been such bad taste to have treated a young lady to so scurvy a fashion. Let's marvelous gold min on crime. The French have a very neat way of putting these things. Our difference of opinion on the subject went so far that I had best set up rooms for myself, so I left Potelcherry Lodge, taking the old Kittimaker and Williams with me. I did not pronounce that right. Yesterday, however, I learned that an event of extreme importance has occurred. The treasure has been discovered. I instantly communicated with Miss Morrison, and all that remains for us to drive out to Norwood, and demand our share. I explained my views last night to Brother Bartholomew, that we shall be expected, if not welcome visitors. Mr. Thaddeus ceased, and sat twitching on his luxurious seat. We all remained silent for our thoughts upon the new development which the mysterious business had taken. Holmes was the first to spring to his feet. You've done well, sir, from first to last, said he. It is possible that we may be able to make you some small return by throwing some light upon that which is still dark to you. But as Miss Morrison remarked just now, it is late, and we had best put the matter through without delay. Our new acquaintance very deliberately coiled up the tubes of his hookah, and produced from behind a curtain a very long, befrogged topcoat with Afghan collar and cuffs. Or extractin. Why did I think that was Afghan? There's no G. This he buttoned tightly up, in spite of the extreme closeness of the night, and finished his attire by putting a rabbit-skin cap, hanging in lappets from covering the ears, so that no part of him was visible, save his mobile and peaky face. My health is somewhat fragile, he remarked as we led the way down the passage. I am compelled to be a valetudinarian. I don't know what that word means. Time for another Google search, Google search, Google search. A person who is unduly anxious about their health, showing undue concern about one's health. That thing! Our cab was awaiting us outside, and our program was evidently prearranged, for the drivers started off at once at a rapid pace. Thaddeus Sholto talked incessantly in a voice which rose high above the rattle of the wheels. Bartholomew's a clever fellow, said he. How do you think he found out where the treasure is? He had come to the conclusion that somewhere indoors. So he worked out all the cubic spaces of the house, made measurements everywhere, but not 1 inch should be unaccounted for. Among other things, he found that the height of the building was 74 feet, but on adding together the heights of all the separate rooms, making every allowance for the space between, which he had ascertained by borings, he could not bringing the total to more than 70 feet. There were 4 feet unaccounted for. There could only be at the top of the building. He knocked a hole, therefore, in the lath and plaster ceiling of the highest room. There enough, he came upon another little garment above, which had been sealed up and known to no one. In the center stood the treasure chest, resting upon 2 rafters. He lowered it through the hole, and there it lies. He computes the value of the jewels at not less than 500,000 sterlings. At the mention of the gigantic sum, we all stared at one another, opened eyes. Mrs. Morrison, could we secure her rights, which would change from a needy governess to a rich heiress in England, surely it was the place of a loyal friend to rejoice at such news. Yet I was ashamed to say that selfishness took me by the soul, that my heart turned as heavy as lead within me. I stammered out some few halting words of congratulation, then sat downcast with my head drooped deaf to the babble of our new acquaintance. He had clearly confirmed hypochondriac. I was dreamily conscious that I was pouring forth indeterminate trains of symptoms and imploring information as to the composition and actions of innumerable quack agnostrums, some of which he bore about in a leather case in his pocket. I trust that he may not remember any of the answers which I gave him that night. Holmes declared that he overheard me caution him against the great dangers of taking more than 2 drops of castor oil. While I recommend cytidine in large doses as a sedative, however that may be, I certainly relieved when our cab pulled up with a jerk and the coachman sprang down to open the door. "This, Miss Morrison, is Pondicherry Lodge," said Thaddeus Thullis as he handed her out. And with that, I will end for the day. We have completed chapter 4 of this book. So, it was recommended to me that I should raid someone. How do you raid someone? Uh, hmm. Da 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 da. Raid and at. Okay, so now that that's settled, let's desktop audio off so I can. All right, let's see. Do 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 do. How about yeah, let's do this one. We said it wrong. Better slash raid at. Okay, slash raid at. Send viewers to another channel when the stream ends. So at. Don't spell slash. It just wouldn't let me slash. I understand. Is this gonna do it? Invalid username. Do I need to put these brackets around it? No? No brackets? Alright. Put at, and then we're gonna check up on that again. Give me a moment. Maybe it'd be best if we do it like this. Copy. Then do I put a space in between the at or just directly? We're gonna try that. That didn't work either. Alright. And off we go. Off y'all go. Raid now. Didn't work. I got in there. Not. So the username is that. Since the raid failed to pick you up, I've been hearing it's been having some issues. So